I'm Matthew Eadie from Evanston Now. I just wrapped up my interview with Democrat Phil Andrew. He's one of 17 Democrats looking to replace longtime Representative Jan Schakowsky in the United States House of Representatives next year. We talked about everything from Israel and Palestine to energy prices, affordability, and healthcare. The full interview is next. I hope you enjoy. All right, we are joined now by Phil Andrew. He's a candidate for Congress in the 9th Congressional District, one of 17 different Democrats running for the nomination to replace Jan Schakowsky. So thank you, Phil, for joining us. He's a 21-year veteran of the FBI, hostage negotiator, survivor of a gun violence incident himself. So we have a lot to talk about. Appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be with you.
Awesome. So let's hop right into it. I'd like to start talking about the Democratic Party as a whole. Obviously, you're running as a Democrat. This is a very blue district. It's almost certain that the winner of this primary on March 17th will be elected in November. So it really all comes down to March, which just early voting starts in about a month. Election day is about 2 months from now. You're a political outsider. You've never run for Congress before. You've never run for any political office before. You'll also be competing against several candidates who have, and they have been elected. So my first question to you is to voters who don't know you, who haven't cast their vote for you before, who maybe have voted for some of your opponents in this race at other levels. Why should people put their one vote in you? And why do you think you can win this race when there are other people who, frankly, have higher name identification, have raised more money, and are polling higher than you at this point? I know we still have time, but there's no question that you have an uphill battle compared to some of these other candidates who are more well known.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. And, one of the things that people should know about me is that as a survivor of one of the first mass shootings in a school ever in 1988, and somebody that took that moment and transitioned it into a life of service, both at the FBI, 21 years as an FBI agent and a hostage negotiator, I have taken on some really, really tough challenges. And one of the things that's been a North Star for me is keeping people safe and defending our democracy, whether it be through working public corruption or countering terror. So I have years of public service experience. It is not the same as political experience. There's no question about that. While I was serving our country, upholding the law, and going to serve and protect and rescue people in some of the most difficult and dangerous circumstances, others were serving in different ways. And I think that we're really at a critical moment in our country. And one of the things that I really want to emphasize to people is, in my mind, that March 17 is only the beginning of the work, that actually what needs to be done to work with folks in this district and work with other members of Congress that will be part of the largest potentially turnover in Congress in decades, at a time when our government institutions, our democracy itself is under threat, is critical. And who we send and with what skills is also going to be critical. So I think that is kind of the thread here, is that are the skills that you might have built in a blue state, in a blue legislature, working to do policy work, are those the same skills that you need at a moment when we have an authoritarian administration that is doing things to really strain and crack our constitutional institutions? And I think we're feeling that every day as we see now criminal subpoenas being delivered to the chair of the Fed to pressure him to lower interest rates. Seen what's happened with ICE. We saw what happened with the deployment of the National Guard. That is a different skill set. And my work and experience working within the intelligence infrastructure, within the FBI, with working with all kinds of branches of government, to understand exactly how and what needs to be done to isolate this administration, to slow it, because we have 2 more years. And I think one of the things that we're seeing as a trend around the country is people with military, law enforcement, and intelligence background are running because we know because we understand what's at stake. And that's a different skill set. And I think the other thing that you introduced with about the Democratic Party, that we aren't healthy, that the reality is that we have been losing elections. The reality is that we have not had a clear message, but more importantly, we have not shown the action that has won the American people's trust, that they believe that this party is one that can guide us. And I think that that makes for a really important opportunity, but also communicating with voters that I'm different, that I've got a different set of skills, and they're vastly different than those that are leading in the polls right now. But what we know is that my message, my service background, my record in public service really resonates with people. And we're doing everything we can to get our name out there with 100 house parties spread over this district, as well as we're going to be doing some paid communication to help get our message out. And I'm just not intimidated. I've been in difficult uphill battles before when lives were on the line. And when our country and our democracy is on the line, I've never been more motivated.
You brought up something there about potentially the Democrats winning back Congress in a way that they haven't in a very long time. Some people liken this to 2006, that midterm win after Iraq War. It's potential. It's very likely the Democrats will win back the House, and if elected to Congress, you would have the obligation to elect a House Speaker. And so, one of the questions a lot of people are asking right now is, will you, or asking candidates across the country, not just you, but would you support Hakeem Jeffries, the current Democratic House leader, as the Speaker, or as if the Democrats for some reason don't win back the House? Would you support Hakeem Jeffries as the party leader? Do you think he has done a sufficient job to remain in charge of House Democrats?
Well, one, I think that is a decision to be made to see who we've elected, and that's what this election in the ninth is going to weigh heavily on. There are major races around the country that are deciding what kind of Democrats we are sending. Are we sending folks that are really mission driven and action oriented, or are we sending people who are much more focused at longevity in the political game? And I think that makes a big difference, because if we are going to have a new class of Congress people, and one of the largest potentially in decades, that I think that we need to take a de novo review of who our leadership is and how focused we are going to be. And mind you, the role of Congress for the next 2 years is going to be focused primarily on oversight and accountability. That Congress has passed less bills in recent years than it has in many, many years. And I think that shows, one, the divided nature and the unhealth of our Congress, but secondly, what strategies and what focuses we are going to have as a Congress in terms of holding this administration accountable. I have a background in negotiation and hostage negotiation, and one thing that I know is that I've never resolved a crisis by screaming at the hostage taker, but I also know that it's very important to be able to isolate the hostage taker. And in a situation like this, where we've seen our democratic institutions and really our whole democracy being held hostage by the tactics and by the ideology of this administration, it's going to take different skill sets, it's going to take different focus, and it's going to take very different leadership. And I would leave that to the decision then to see who we arrive with and what kind of team and focus and mission they're going to be offering. But I would be very interested in potentially supporting this speaker if he's bringing the kind of agenda, the focus, the energy, and the laser focus on holding this administration accountable. And though so far, and I get that we are in the minority, we haven't done that. And we haven't done that successfully. So those are all things that I would be considering in how I might participate and support leadership in a new House Speaker.
Yeah, you kind of answered what my next question was going to be. Do you think that the Democrats have sufficiently put up that opposition and oversight? We're over a year into this first well, yeah, actually, we are over a year into the first term of this Congress and nearly a year into the first term of this presidency. Do you think that this Democratic leadership today has done enough job, a well enough job to remain in leadership?
Well, have they done enough to stand up to this administration?
Hmm.
No.
Hmm.
I understand that there are limitations when you are in not the majority party. Elections absolutely have consequence. Now, that is something that I think we need to hold the Democratic Party responsible for. If we are losing elections and we are not extending a majority, of course, we're going to lose influence over these moments. But what is happening next? How are we working with those moderates right across the aisle that are feeling the same discomfort, whether it be the increases on ACH, which our communities are certainly feeling that and seeing the increase of their health insurance policies skyrocketing under this Congress and under this administration. But how are we building the kind of relationships where we're picking off enough of those folks across the aisle which are sharing that pain in their districts? And that's where I think really real leadership comes from, is when in a moment of crisis, when you need to build the kind of strong coalitions and healthy leadership to take on these hard problems, what are you doing to expand your coalition, your team, to get these things done? And I think that there's many folks that are across the aisle that are feeling that heat and that we need to be engaged with to get over the top, to get the kind of congressional support to hold this administration accountable and to do the things that people are counting on us, particularly around healthcare and affordability at this moment.
I definitely want to get to talking about healthcare, and we can get to that in a minute. But I do want to talk a little bit more about yourself ideologically. This is a very progressive seat. It has been a progressive seat for a long time. Jan Schakowsky has been outspoken about calling herself a progressive. Do you consider yourself to be a progressive?
Absolutely. I've been working on progressive causes like gun violence prevention my entire life. I've actually dedicated myself to making sure that we keep families and communities safe. And I've worked with almost every part of this district, including with Jan and some of the other folks in this race, to accomplish that. And one of the reasons Illinois is a leader in gun violence prevention is because of the early work that I was dedicated to in the 80s. And then I took that on into the FBI in more of a role of responding to those that have been impacted by violence. But my work ever since leaving the FBI 8 years ago has been very engaged in that. And what I know is that our communities, and particularly those in the ninth, the diversity of our culture, the diversity of our economic, our languages, even the geography, are things that we really make us strong, and they need to be celebrated. And they create an opportunity for us to be an incredible leader in the country if we embrace them. So while sharing some of those really deeply progressive causes like healthcare that is affordable and available to everyone. No one should be without healthcare. We'll recognize the dignity of everyone and protecting the dignity of everybody in every community, whether it be our Jewish community and protecting them from hate crimes, our gay and lesbian community, protecting them from discrimination and bias, and even hate crime itself today. All of those things I care deeply and have worked hard. I actually designed the hate crimes curriculum for the Illinois Holocaust Museum for them to deploy in responding to increased hate crimes in our area. So these are causes and areas that I've been very involved in. But I also think that there are big pockets of this community that have been ignored and have been gone unlistened to because of its diversity. We've got some wealthy areas. We've got areas that extend, in the last 2 years of this district, all the way to Cary and Algonquin. And I don't know that we have pulled them into the fold in the ways that they recognize that they are part of the ninth, that they have a representative that listens and cares and is working for all of their families and communities to thrive.
Do you think the party should do that? And how would you do that as a representative? How would you appeal to more moderate or conservative or Republican voters who might not vote for you, um, while still delivering on the progressive promises that, a large portion of the district in Chicago and Evanston, in the more progressive communities, are expecting from their representative, when they send whoever it is, whether it's you or somebody else, to Congress?
Yeah, well, this is the part that's easy for me because I have responded to and supported so many diverse communities in my work in crisis management and as a hostage negotiator and with the FBI that I love the idea of engaging people who have different vantage points, that have different experiences and come from different cultures and backgrounds. And I think that's one of the lost arts in politics today. It's one of the reasons that we are so divided as a nation, and we're acutely divided as a Congress, is because the ability to sit down with somebody with a different vantage point, different background, and have a conversation and literally listen and understand, that's where the magic of recognizing our commonality comes from. And unfortunately, we have, and some candidates in this race are really much more about trying to only activate one portion of our community and cater to one portion of the electorate, and then win with that, and then run on issues that they don't really solve, that they're hoping to run on again and again and make a whole career out of that. That unfortunately has seeped into the culture of our politics, and it's one of the things that I'm running against. And I think it's one of the things that I bring uniquely to this, the ability to talk to nearly everyone and recognize our commonality and then pull them into common themes and strategies so that we actually can get the work of the people done.
We can move on to healthcare because you brought up healthcare in a couple of your previous responses. You've talked about the need for healthcare as being a right, not a privilege. You talked about the Affordable Care Act just now a few minutes ago. I think you've talked about expanding Medicaid and expanding the ACA. Do you specifically support Medicare for all, though? It's a position that a lot of Democrats is becoming more popular year after year. I think it has over 100 co-sponsors when it's introduced yearly in the House. Is it something that you would sign on to?
Well, let me say this first about healthcare is that this is deeply personal to me. That when I was shot in 1988, my father was between jobs and we had catastrophic healthcare, which meant that it basically kicked in with a high limit around $10,000. And I was very lucky because I was a student at the University of Illinois at the time. And the university actually contacted my parents and suggested to them that I enroll for summer school and take on the $65 summer insurance, which saved my family hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical bills in the medical work that went into saving my life. So I deeply, deeply appreciate how important it is for everyone to have access to quality and affordable health care. And I think there's a lot of ways that we can get there. This is a tricky and complicated issue. And I think there's are ways of expanding Medicare and whether and I do appreciate that kind of motto of Medicaid for all or Medicare for all, but it really is then what does that mean? Where do we draw the lines? Is that for everybody at every income? Absolutely, we want to make sure that those that can't afford it, or in the model of the ACH, that we are, or the ACA, that we are providing for support for folks to keep those premiums affordable and keep them in this system. But there are so many nuances to this that it's hard to just say, yes, I'm for that without understanding the exact details. Providing that for high income household doesn't feel like that makes sense. When we have folks that are willing to pay into private systems and companies that are willing to pay for private health care, I think it makes sense to keep those where we can, but making sure that we've got a floor that everybody has access to affordable and quality health care is critical. And in these coming years where we're going to have to stitch that together, it's critical that we keep our eye on that. And this administration has made it clear that they want to wipe that out. that for whatever reason, they're fixated on destroying healthcare for millions of people. And I think that defending the ACA and recognizing that there are others, particularly across the aisle, that are feeling that heat in their districts, and recognizing this is an opportunity for us to shore that up and expand that while we're looking for the finals, the more comprehensive solutions that we might be able to agree to with a less divided Congress and a supportive administration.
So it kind of sounds like you support some form of public option, an
Absolutely. Yes, if there's nothing available, it has to exist there somewhere. And one existing there among our marketplaces makes sense to me.
but still, just to be clear, remaining like private insurance if you would like it, a public healthcare option if you would prefer that.
It really, I think where it's needed, that I can see where we would be taking advantage of this, where companies pulling off or private payers not seeing the advantage of their own system if there's a public option there available. So I think again, this is really critical, like many complicated things in our tax code, of working night dials where there's the right incentives for the system to exist for those that can't afford it and want that option, and then providing that floor for those that can't and need access.
Right. So right now, I want to push on this point a little bit because Jan Schakowsky is currently a co-sponsor of Medicare for All as it's been proposed in 2017, 2021, 2025. Would you co-sponsor that legislation? And if it ever came to a House under a Democratic House, would you vote against that?
I will take an absolute review, and I know that that is a very solid option for us. And I want to understand how that then relates to private insurance and other insurance options that are available that private insurers, private companies offer, and make sure that we aren't diluting that, but maintaining it. So yes, I would certainly consider it and consider being a co-sponsor of it if it makes sense without disrupting those private and corporate offerings that that are working for others.
On to another issue that you probably know very well. You're a former federal law enforcement officer yourself, former FBI agent, like I said. And if people don't know your history, I'd really encourage them to go read up on that a bit more. But I do want to ask you about what's been in the news the past week. We're recording this on January 12th, so it's a little bit less than a week after the shooting in Minneapolis, where a 37-year-old woman was shot and killed by a federal ICE agent. What was your reaction to seeing that video? I know there's been a couple of videos that have come out since. As a former law enforcement officer yourself, what did you think of that, and what do you make of the response from both sides of the aisle about it? You have Democrats saying this is, in a lot of cases, saying that this is murder and that this agent should be held accountable. Republicans are saying, I see nothing wrong. What was your response, and what do you say to people as a former officer yourself?
Yes, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. One, I'm horrified. I'm horrified that Miss Good lost her life, and what appears to be needlessly. And I have been very critical of ICE. One, in the way they've been recruited. Their recruitment standards are simply abominable and not in line with other federal agencies like the FBI. The way I was recruited, the way they have been background checked is very loose, and they have a lot of folks who are slipping in and that they haven't completed their background checks before they're putting them on the street. And third, their training is awful, and you can see it just by the way you see the deployments. And then finally, the mission and the way they are conducting it is not done in a way that is elevating public safety. And I'll say that is in the context of an administration that has chose to use them to go after folks that they originally said were going to be the bad actors, those committing violent crimes who are here undocumented and using ICE as a vehicle to get folks who are otherwise committing criminal, violent activity and removing them from communities. And that is not what they have done. they actually are creating a public safety risk in the way that they are deploying, in the way that they are trained, and the lack of command and control and accountability. So when I look at that, I see the result of that huge context of how they have arrived on the street with a misguided mission, with the wrong people, poorly trained, and lack of accountability. And what I saw there was a violation of what I believe is the training that I received, that you only use deadly force in defense of self or others from deadly death or great bodily harm. And that is not what I saw. And one of the things that troubles me greatly about this is that it doesn't look like, and the way that this administration has responded, that we are going to get the accountability that we need for public trust. We need for all law enforcement agencies and policing bodies, the kind of trust that really elevates public safety. So I am dismayed that this administration has done this. And one of the reasons I am running for Congress is to hold this administration accountable. I think a lot of people forget that that is a big part of the constitutional responsibility of Congress. It's not just to pass laws and be the purse strings. It's also to provide for accountability and oversight over this administration and its departments. And without Congress being healthy and without the right people in Congress, we're not going to get that kind of accountability that we need. So very disappointed to see this. My heart goes out to the family. And this is obviously something that we need to do more to stop. But we don't have a Congress who's functioning effectively to provide that oversight.
You talked about oversight and accountability. What does that actually look like when it comes to I mean, there's going to be very limited oversight and accountability with a Republican-controlled Congress. There's no doubt. I know there's talk about impeachment of both Kristi Noem and Donald Trump. Are those methods that you support for either one or both of them? And, I'm talking about now, but also if elected next January and beyond, what would that oversight look like in your eyes? And what do you think the final 2 years of the term of Donald Trump's term should be met with by a Democratic majority if that's ultimately what your party is able to successfully get back?
Yeah, well, let me break that down. First, that is one of the main responsibilities of Congress, is to provide oversight and responsibility. And you need people with skills, experience, and background to provide that. I'm uniquely qualified with 21 years in the FBI as an investigator, actually providing accountability. And this is an intersection here of kind of terrorism, intelligence, and public corruption. That's really what we're up against with this administration. And we're going to need folks, and I think that's why you're seeing folks on the ballot winning that have backgrounds similar to mine. And so secondly, what can be done? What and should be done now is, I don't think that this has been enough of a congressional responsibility. We just came out of the fall of a debt oversight vote, and Democrats took the temperature and felt like the only thing to take a stand on there was healthcare. Now, critically important, healthcare, absolutely, and the raise of these premiums, and we've seen already that they're reneging on that agreement to not do that. But there were so many other things that were critically important, like the lack of following the law by this administration, by it not submitting to the accountability of court and actually disobeying court orders. That, again, this is, I've got a background in hostage and crisis negotiation. You would not keep conceding to an administration that has not shown any willingness to follow the law, to respect court orders, or abide by prior agreements. And I think there's so much more at stake. And for me, the arrow here is in the red zone with regard to our democracy, with regard to being able to safeguard our institutions. So when I think of this, I think of who is prepared to arrive in Congress on January 2027 with colleagues to sort of build the sort of teamwork, the kind of coalition where you can hold this administration accountable. Because while The Nome, the head of Homeland Security, and this president have, without question, done things, and their behavior is impeachable. Our ability to do that, we've seen what's happened, and absolutely, if we could, we should. But more importantly, is who is arriving on January 2027 with the ability to get down Pennsylvania Avenue and get inside these agencies and work with those that are waiting for us to arrive, like the cavalry. We are on red alert with regard to what those that are bravely holding these, in these departments and holding the line on the Constitution. They are holding their breath till we can get there. And if we don't send folks who know how to do this and know how to do the teamwork and understand how these agencies work, we are going to the Democrats are going to do a grave disservice, and we are going to arrive as scattered as we've been for decades in creating this mess.
You did note there that if you could, you should impeach. So it sounds like that is something that's on the table, but you said that there's more that needs to be done than just that. About ICE in particular, yes. Do you see a role for ICE, and what do you make of Democrats who say we should abolish ICE? It's become a talking point in this campaign over the past week and a half. It has been one long before that as well, but there are several candidates who have taken that position throughout this campaign. Do you agree with that position? And if not, why not?
Well, look, I come out of the federal government. I know a federal government that works. That is my experience. And one of the important things that I want young people that are watching this to know, that government service, that your decision to patriotically raise your hand and serve your government is honorable, despite what this administration says and does. And we need young people, and we need more people who have a service heart to be willing to join government and do that hard work. Our democracy depends on it. And every department that has been created needs good people. What we've seen with the investment in ICE and in the Department of Homeland Security, the budgets they've been given and the missions they've been given and the ideological ways they've been used have obviously created a huge rift with our migrant community. And we've seen, when that's done improperly, how it creates a public safety risk instead of addressing one. And I would prefer to reform these agencies, as we have to do with many agencies. And there are many folks that have been hired that should not have been hired. There are a lot of folks that need training that never got training. But we also need to reform these in the context of a larger reforming of our immigration system. There is no question that we need a policy that is inviting and is compassionate to those that would like to migrate to the United States. It is who we are as a nation, and it's secondly critical to our future. We need a lot more people to come to the United States. We should make this an inviting, welcoming, and prosperous place for folks. But we also need to know who comes here. Yes, obviously we need immigration reform. These Congresses and these administrations have shown that they've been incapable of doing that. I think that is one of the examples of our unhealthy politics, that running on these issues instead of solving these issues has become the game. And we clearly need an immigration policy that is inviting, that vets people quickly and efficiently at the border, and then assimilates them and gets them as part of our economy as quickly as possible. We need to do that. Our future depends on that. So I see all of this as related to reforming our immigration policy, making sure that every one of our departments and our agencies is responsive, following the rule of law, is constitutionally minded. And I know, having worked in the FBI, that we can do that. But it has not happened, and we have not been successful with that with ICE, and we're seeing that because of the public safety risk and the shootings that we're taking that appear to be unjustified.
want to move on to foreign policy, another place that you have some experience, and another topic that is very top of mind for a lot of voters, especially in this community, a highly diverse community, as we've talked about a little bit. Specifically on Israel and Palestine, which is one of the most highly talked about foreign policy issues. I know there are many, and you have talked about others as well, and we can get to those in a second, especially right now with what's going on in Iran and Venezuela. But for Israel and Palestine in particular, you've talked about the need for long-term peace, security. You say you support a two-state solution. You've called it a complicated issue, and you've also called it a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Um, where do you lie with your foreign policy views in compared to where some of these other candidates in this race are? There are several who have called Israel's actions in Gaza genocidal. Do you agree with that position? And what kind of policies do you support to push back against the Israeli government, which pretty much everybody in the Democratic Party has said have gone too far in their retaliation in Gaza?
Yes. Well, one, I'm informed by two things. I'm a national security professional. I spent 21 years working and supporting a counterterrorism mission. So I have a deep understanding of what it looks like to help people be safe and to work with international agencies to do that. And secondly, I'm a survivor of violence. And one of the things that I know and believe is that violence often can beget more violence. And there needs to be something that interrupts that cycle. And that's why when I'm kind of charting my position in this, I'm guided by the belief that we really need leaders who believe in peace and are willing to work toward peace. So one, I recognize that Israel is a key partner in keeping the United States safe, and they have been a key ally in that region where we have regimes like Iran, who is under great distress right now, that have been supporting proxies that have the mission of wiping the state of Israel off of the map. And that creates a situation where that terrorism has grown and impacted people, not just in Israel and around the Middle East area, but also overseas. So that we benefit greatly from a relationship with allies in the Middle East who share a vision of countering terrorism and promoting peace. But secondly, we really need to recognize that we have a humanitarian crisis in Gaza and that we need to be doing everything we can, including the Israelis and other partner organizations and countries, to surge in as much support as possible. But this needs to be guided with a long-term strategy toward bringing peace to that region. And there are a number of very, very strong international structures like the Abraham Accord and others that would guide us to a two-party state, but we are just not close to that. And I think a lot has to be done to put pressure, to collaborate, to work with all the parties involved to make sure that peace is is the vision for the future there.
What makes you confident that this Israeli government, the Netanyahu government, is interested in peace in Gaza? This is a government, and Netanyahu specifically, who has said that there will not be a Palestinian state. What is, and that is a criticism of the two-state solution in some circles. They say, why should we be advocating for a solution if the Israeli government, the Netanyahu government, has no interest in that kind of solution? What's your response to that? And again, why are you confident that the Israeli government is interested in the same peace that you're interested in?
Well, let me be clear that when I talk about these regions, whether it be Iran, and we're seeing this right now, that I think that what's going on in Iran is much more aligned with a future, as we see these protesters saying that they have had enough of this regime. And I think that's true of a lot of places where we see leaders in government, not unlike our own, that the people disagree with. and that we have to do way more to hold them accountable to a vision toward peace. So while Netanyahu and others have processed this campaign, I think they need to be held accountable for where we jump off into peace. And I separate that from others in that government and the Israeli peace themselves. And I think that's really critical, that the language we use and how we address and approach these problems. What I've found as a hostage negotiator, that if you start with the extremes, if you start with the othering and the belittling and the dehumanizing, it's very, very difficult to arrive at agreements. And I've seen what the language of hate and extremism does in other places in the world, and I've seen what it does on our streets as communities and individuals are targeted because of their background, because of their religion. So I caution those from using extreme othering and dehumanizing language as we're trying to move people toward a shared and common potential for peace.
You think it's important, though, to call out governments if they have committed, in some cases, and organizations have called it acts of genocide? I mean, it sounds like you disagree with that framing, but if that is the case, and some organizations have said that, United Nations organizations, human rights organizations, scholars, candidates in this race have said that is a bar that Democrats should be willing to take. You said you disagree with extreme language, but do you think it is important to call something a spade if that's what organizations have come to determination that things are?
Well, I think it's important to remember where you want to enter into a process. If that is your job as a human rights organization, and you taking a position on that, then I welcome that. And we need to maintain a environment where people are able to say and speak freely. But I think when we move into hate and extremism, that is damaging to any process where we might find resolution and find peace. So I, for one, having spent a career going to crises and resolving them effectively, I know that I want to maintain the ability to engage all those involved in a process to move them toward peaceful resolution. And I understand that not everybody is seeking to participate in the actual negotiation of and navigating toward peaceful resolution. One of the reasons I'm in this race is because of that. Not just because we're a divided country, but there are places in the world that have been at war and experiencing violence and suffering and terror for decades. And we need people who are willing to lead with both a service heart and a vision toward peace.
Why is that the role of a member of Congress and not, say, a diplomat?
I think it's the role of all of us.
But specifically for you, if elected, you talked about being able to go and come at this with prepared to negotiate and talk about these issues with the opposition and the opposing side, or with the state of Israel or whoever, whatever country or foreign nation we're talking about. Do you think it's the role of the members of Congress, of which you would be, to take those positions and kind of come at this from a more neutral position, it sounds like, in these discussions? Is that not role of the Secretary of State or any other diplomat, ambassador, something like that?
Well, I'd like to say that we would have those folks. In this current administration, I don't think we have that expertise at that level. And a healthy Congress would absolutely be engaged, as it has been engaged in the past, in negotiating peace deals. But the reality is that this is who I am. These are the skills and experiences that I bring, and I will bring them both to Congress to work with others in our party, which is very, very unhealthy and divided, but also, of course, with those across the aisle. And these are skills that are unique. And I understand that they're not typically, as you're pointing out, they are not typical of a politician. But that is part of the point here. And I think that's a key differentiator from me and anybody else in this race. Having been to and worked with people that are in and facing some of the worst moments and the most austere environments imaginable, and still finding agreement and resolution is critical. And in a place where we are in this country, as divided as we are, as dysfunctional as Congress is, and with an authoritarian effort underway by this administration, these skills are critical. And Matthew, you make the point, this is exactly why I am in this campaign. Because I recognize, as somebody who's taken an oath to defend and protect the Constitution, with 3 children in the United States Navy, that we are in the red zone, that this is our ship. And if we give up this ship, we are going to be lost. This midterm election is critical for the future of America. Who we send to Congress to take on this challenge of this administration, our dividedness as a nation, is critical. And we need people who have the skills that I have developed and honed over 21 years and 8 years since to navigate this in ways that are not destructive and violent, which we are already seeing on our streets.
2 other foreign policy questions, and you can separate them out because I understand they're very different issues. But right now, there's a lot of conversation about Iran and Venezuela. Do you see any need for the United States military to intervene in either one of those conflicts, protests in Iran, anything more in Venezuela? I believe that the president is planning to meet with the acting president of Venezuela this week. Obviously, 2 different issues, 2 different conflicts. What's the role of the United States in those conflicts? And do you support any military action in either of those countries?
Well, look, one, this administration has not demonstrated the kind of credibility that you need to be able to act and use military force with credibility. What we are seeing is their assault on the entire process, their lack of coordination and consent from Congress. If we were having a clear and healthy debate about where we should be intervening around the world, using real facts, relying on our democratic institutions and our law enforcement and intelligence institutions that are guided by the Constitution, I would have far greater confidence about how we could evaluate where we intercede effectively to preserve life and to elevate democracy and our interests abroad. What I am not seeing is the kind of accountability that is required to create the kind of trust and belief and faith in our actions. And I think it's dangerous, and it creates a very, very risky situation. And all the more why these midterm elections are critical, and who we are sending and how they understand these agencies and the people within them operate, and how we hold this administration accountable. So it's very difficult to say what we should be interceding on. Certainly when American interests and lives are at stake, that creates a situation, an environment where we could consider using force. But we just do not have the operational insight, given the way this administration operates, to have any clarity on whether these are the right decisions or not.
Quickly, because we're coming up on 50 minutes here, I want to talk a little bit about energy and AI. This obviously impacts affordability, which is a campaign issue in every campaign across this country. Do you support any regulations on AI, on data centers? What would that look like? And do you think that the Congress has an obligation to step in to address something that we know is increasingly impactful to energy prices here in Illinois, but also across the country? Where do you stand on those AI energy issues?
Absolutely. We need a national strategy for AI and energy. And it's very, very difficult for individual states and municipalities to grapple with these humongous issues without federal guidance. And unfortunately, we've created an atmosphere that is so dysfunctional where we don't have the kind of experts at the table. We are science deniers. We have defunded some of the critical infrastructure that would help us and guide us toward making the kind of policy decisions that are good for America, good for humanity, and allow us to competitively advantage this to enhance our economies and our infrastructure and our energy system delivery. So this is the place for Congress. And we are going to need to bring in a generation of Congress people who appreciate that much of the expertise around these issues is not held in Congress or potentially even in the federal government at the moment. And we need to make government and government service and collaborating with government much more attractive, worthwhile, and effective to invite the kind of voices where we can shape this policy effectively.
I ask you one last question. Then I'm going to leave it to you to kind of close it out. Last question about experience. You certainly have a wealth of experience in various different fields, but you've never been a legislator. Why are you prepared to go to Washington in a year, take that oath, and become a legislator for the first time? And why are you more prepared than some of the other people in this race who have had that experience here in Springfield, citywide, school boards? There are people who have won elections and they have represented people before. You haven't won an election. You haven't represented anybody in a public body before. Why are you prepared to do that now?
Well, one is that I think the skills and experience required for this moment is vastly different because of the crisis situation that we are in. The ability to bring accountability and oversight is exactly where my skill sets lie. But I don't want to dismiss how much work that I have done to shape policy, particularly here in Illinois. Illinois is one of the leading states in gun violence prevention, largely because of the early work that I did with legislatures in the 80s, working with Grace Mary Stern, with Jan Schakowsky, and many other early legislators who recognized the importance of violence prevention. We are now the leading state in efforts around policy. I was there when we were passing the gun dealer licensing bill. I've worked to help implement the firearm restraining law. I was right there working behind the scenes to build the kind of momentum to pass the assault weapons ban. And I am right here providing the expertise to our state as it defends itself from the gun lobby as it challenges those laws. So I actually have a fair amount of policy chops in that space, and I understand how to build the kind of teams and coalitions, both within this party and across the aisle, to get things done. And I would say that I've done that in really austere and difficult places. When we were working on gun violence prevention in the 80s and the 90s, before I was in the Bureau, we didn't have a blue state. We didn't have a Democratic-controlled legislator. We didn't have a Democrat in the governor. We had to convince and win the hearts and minds of people that disagreed with us to get that work done. And so I think that the skills around that are vastly different than folks who have grown up in a blue state, in a blue legislature, and now stepping into a realm of a Congress that just 5 years ago was violently assaulted. And that was by the B team. That was by this administration before it brought this kind of agenda of destruction toward our democratic institutions. So I say this with humility and also as a cautionary. What we are stepping into in the next 2 years with this administration that already unleashed a January 6th on Congress, I think that we cannot underestimate what kind of challenges, both physically, emotionally, and potentially even violently, might be in store. And I think that there's almost a level of naivety in approaching this. And there are not many in the country that are willing to take this on. But there's certainly, I stand distinctively with the experience to match this moment and hold this administration accountable in a very dangerous and dynamic moment for our country.
We will leave it at that. I appreciate it so much. Thank you, Phil Andrew, for joining.
Glad to be with you, Matthew.